The town of Havenwood clung to the edge of the map, a place where the old gave way to the truly ancient. Dominating the landscape, half hidden by a perpetual mist, was Blackwood Manor, skeletal monument to forgotten tragedy. Rumor claimed its walls breathed, its windows watched, and its grand hall housed a curse that tasted of eternal life and young men's blood. $200, Finn. All you got to do is walk up to the porch and get a clear picture of the front door, Ethan challenged, leaning back against his beat-up Ford Bronco. He was the group's pragmatic leader, a film student who dismissed local folklore as atmospheric filler. Finn, the group's perpetually joking anchor, swallowed hard but grinned. 200. I'd spend a night with a banshee for 50. But we all know the real money is on the inside. Caleb, the quietest of the three, shivered despite the late summer heat. He was the group's artist, the one who saw the patterns in the rust and the shadows in the glass. Guys, this isn't a joke. My grandmother, she grew up here. She said the air around that place is hungry. She called her the Lady in White. The Lady in White, Ethan scoffed, pulling a flask from his jacket. More like the lady in need of a good dry cleaner. It's an abandoned house, Caleb. Structural damage. Rats. Maybe a few squirrels. We're going in full investigation. Think of the footage. Think of the clicks. Ethan was planning a documentary for his thesis, debunking of local legends. Caleb was dragged along for his eye for detail and atmospheric photography. Finn came for the sheer, idiotic thrill. It was midnight when they finally scaled the crumbling brick wall surrounding the property. The air immediately changed. It grew heavy, cold, and strangely scented like jasmine and old copper. The manor loomed, a jagged silhouette against a bruised, moonless sky. Its architecture was Gothic excess. All sharp gables, crumbling gargoyles, and ivy that seemed to choke rather than cling. Smells like a rich lady's crypt, Finn whispered, pulling his phone flashlight out. Ethan, camera rolling, pushed open the massive oak front door. It groaned a protest that seemed to echo from the foundation itself. Inside, the manor was a masterpiece of decay. Dust lay thick, yet the atmosphere was paradoxically clean, free of the damp rot that should plague an abandoned structure. The entrance hall was immense, crowned by a sweeping staircase. Caleb pointed to the wall, his voice strained. Look, hanging in the center of the wall, perfectly preserved beneath a layer of dust that seemed to avoid it, was a portrait. It depicted a woman of breathtaking, impossible beauty. She had hair the color of midnight eyes that seemed to shift between emerald and smoke, and a smile that promised both rapture and ruin. She wore a dress of antique lace, and around her neck was a deep velvet choker. Holy cow, Finn breathed, forgetting the fear for a moment. She's stunning. Seraphina DeMont, Ethan read from a tarnished brass plaque below the frame. Died in 1888. Cause a sudden, inexplicable wasting sickness. Real spooky. As Ethan filmed the portrait, the air grew noticeably warmer, a seductive, cloying heat. The scent of jasmine intensified. I'm getting out of here, Caleb muttered, his eyes wide. Before anyone could move, A sound drifted down the grand staircase, a sound that was pure, clear, and hauntingly beautiful. It was a woman humming an ancient minor key melody. Ethan's skepticism warred with adrenaline. Someone's in here. Gotta be squatters. He started up the stairs. His camera pointed up into the gloom. Finn followed, a mixture of terror and curiosity overriding his common sense. Caleb stayed rooted at the bottom, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. At the top of the landing, the humming stopped. Standing in the darkness of a long corridor, bathed in the faint glow of moonlight filtering through a tall window, was a figure. It was the woman from the portrait, Seraphina. She was dressed in a gown of white silk that shimmered like moonlight on snow. Her beauty was magnified tenfold, in persona perfection that felt unnatural, an illusion woven from pure desire. Her eyes, those smoky emeralds, fixed on Ethan, lost little lambs. Her voice was a soft, silken chime, carrying an accent that sounded older than the house itself. Ethan, the unflappable documentarian, felt his knees weaken. He lowered the camera slightly. "Ma'am, we didn't mean to trespass. We're students." She glided toward him. She didn't walk. She seemed to float, her bare feet silent on the dusty floorboards. Students of what, dear boy? Of history, of the heart. She reached out a hand, her skin porcelain white, her fingernails painted a shocking, deep crimson. As her cool fingertips brushed his cheek, Ethan felt a sudden, irresistible euphoria wash over him. All fear evaporated, replaced by a dizzying sense of devotion. He wanted only to please her, to stay in the light of her terrifying, perfect presence. Behind him, Finn let out a small, choked sound. "Seraphina," she purred, her eyes never leaving Ethan's. "And you are welcome here, all of you." Caleb, driven by primal terror, managed to find his voice. "Ethan, Finn, let's go. Now." His shout broke the spell momentarily. Ethan blinked, shaking his head as if waking from a deep sleep. He saw the woman, and this time he saw something beyond the beautier flicker of pure ravenous hunger in her eyes, a shadow of something ancient and predatory beneath the flawless skin. "Run," Ethan yelled, finally understanding. Seraphina smiled, a slow, predatory curve of her lips. She moved with impossible speed, a blur of white silk, grabbing Ethan's arm. Her grip was iron cold. "Such a delectable spirit," she whispered, burying her face in his neck. Ethan felt a sharp, burning pinprick, followed immediately by a draining, dizzying weakness. It wasn't just physical. It was soul deep. He felt his life force being drawn out, leaving him hollow. Finn, surprisingly, reacted instantly. He snatched the heavy camera tripod from Ethan's hand and swung it, connecting with a sickening crack against Seraphina's shoulder. The effect was instantaneous. Seraphina shrieked a high, inhuman sound that vibrated through the structure and made the dust fly. She recoiled, clutching her shoulder. The illusion of human perfection momentarily shattered. On the white silk, a small patch where the tripod had struck, blackened and withered, revealing a glimpse of dry, desiccated tissue beneath the illusion. "You pathetic worm," she hissed, turning her smoky gaze on Finn. Finn didn't wait. He grabbed Ethan, who was already stumbling, barely conscious, and dragged him back down the stairs. Caleb was waiting at the bottom, tears streaming down his face. The back door, the old servant's passage. They burst through the heavy velvet curtains covering a rear archway and stumbled into a maze of dark, claustrophobic corridors. The air here was heavy with true decay, the stench of damp earth and mold. They could hear Seraphine's movements above them, not footsteps, but a rhythmic slithering and the occasional, frustrated crash of furniture. The sound was getting closer. "She feeds on blood," Caleb gasped, pulling Ethan's arm over his shoulder. "Not just blood, life. That's how she stays. Preserved. My grandmother said she's not just a ghost. She's a Lamia, a vampire of the spirit." They found the servants' exit a small, warped wooden door leading into a thicket of overgrown briars behind the manor. But as they reached it, a terrifying clarity emerged from the shadows. Seraphina was already there. She hadn't chased them through the corridors. She had appeared, somehow traversing the space instantaneously, like smoke reforming. She stood between them and freedom, her face no longer perfectly beautiful. The mask of loveliness had slipped, revealing the truth beneath hollowed eyes. Skin stretched taut over sharp bone, and a maw that was too wide, filled with needle-sharp teeth that seemed to gleam wetly in the gloom. "The first one was sweet," she rasped, her voice now a dry, terrible thing. "But I prefer the taste of the truly terrified." She lunged toward Caleb. Caleb threw himself back, tripping over a coil of rope. Ethan, barely standing, pushed him forward toward the door. "Go, go, Caleb." Finn watched the horror unfold. The ancient, predatory entity bearing down on his terrified friend. A sudden, cold resolve settled over him. He was the biggest, the loudest, the one who always made the jokes. Maybe this time he could make a difference. He saw a heavy, rusted iron poker lying near an old, bricked-up fireplace. Without a word, without a thought for the pain, he scooped up the poker. "Hey, Queen of the Dust," Finn roared, stepping between Seraphina and the scrambling Caleb. Seraphina stopped, turning her monstrous gaze slowly toward Finn. A flicker of interest replaced the raw hunger. "A sacrifice," she murmured, savoring the word. "How traditional. You want life," Finn spat, gripping the poker so hard his knuckles turned white. "Come and get it, you dried-up old thing. But you'll have to get through me first." It was the taunt that mattered. Seraphine's mask of beauty, even in its corrupted state, was tied to her vanity. The insults stung through centuries of power. She let out another ear-splitting scream of pure rage and abandoned Caleb, rushing Finn instead. Finn swung the iron poker with all his might, aiming not for her head, but for the chest, where a human heart should be. The impact was like hitting granite. The poker clanged uselessly and bounced away, ripping a long tear in the white silk. But the moment of impact bought them time. "Run. Go." Finn screamed, shoving Caleb with the last of his strength toward the door. Caleb scrambled, pulling the dazed Ethan with him. He looked back just as Seraphina wrapped her long, brittle arms around Finn. She pressed her grotesque face against his neck, and Finn let out a single, piercing cry of agony that was cut short. Caleb slammed the wooden door shut and threw the heavy, rusted bolt. He and Ethan stumbled through the thick briars, not stopping to look back, driven only by the sound of the creature's satisfied, terrible silence behind them. They didn't stop running until they reached the main road, the rising sun casting long, weak shadows through the mist. They collapsed by the Bronco, gasping for air that tasted clean and real again. Ethan was still pale, weak and shaking, the two small pinpricks on his neck weeping tiny spots of blood. But he was alive. Caleb sat hunched over, covered in mud and scratches, staring blankly at the road. Finn was gone. Finn, the Joker, the reckless one, the friend who had saved them both. Ethan slowly reached up and touched the back of his neck where the creature had fed. He felt a deep, terrifying emptiness, a hunger not his own, but a memory of the creature's desire. We have to go back for him," Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse. Caleb shook his head, his eyes empty. "No, we can't. She didn't just kill him, Ethan. She took him, every piece of him. It's over." He pulled Finn's phone, which he had snatched from the ground near the door, from his pocket. He turned it on and opened the camera roll. There, in the first picture, was the perfect, beautiful, smiling face of Seraphina DeMont. In the last picture, taken moments before the confrontation, was Finn's reflection in the glass of a window, scared, but determined. The two survivors drove away from Havenwood as the sun climbed higher, leaving the oppressive shadow of Blackwood Manor behind them. They carried no footage, no documentary proof, and no easy answers. They carried only the cold, crippling certainty of what they had seen, the indelible phantom weight of the friend they had lost, and the chilling realization that beauty, when perfected and eternal, is often the deadliest disguise for the ancient, hungry void. They knew Seraphina would remain there, waiting, and they knew the sound of a woman humming a beautiful ancient melody would haunt their sleep for the rest of their lives.